Hello, hello, my name is Clark Heron, aka the Harry Hobo, and welcome to AKA Sports Lucky number 7 of Season 2. Fletch is joining me yet once again this week. Fletch, hopefully your weekend has gone well. We have a nice, wonderful topic. Before we get to that topic, though, tell the people where they can find us.
Yes, sir. Welcome back, folks. You can find us again. You can find us anywhere. And I put emphasis on anywhere. We're on Twitter, aka Sports Pod. We're on Facebook. What is it? Facebook.com/, aka Sports FB. We're on YouTube. Literally just search us on aka Sports there. You can hit us up on Apple or find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Google Podcasts. Go to our main page, which is anchor.fm/ aka sports. Feel free to converse with us. You can comment on our YouTube videos. You can leave. You can speak with me directly on Twitter. Feel free to chime in with anything that you have to say or anything that you want us to talk about. Or if you just want to talk to me, just feel free to hit me up on Twitter. I'm totally fine with that too.
Yeah, absolutely can find us anywhere. It kind of reminds me of that Kevin Hart commercial where he's finding out slowly but surely that, you can find him anywhere. Yes, that's us. Just don't
Yeah,
yell and scream and scare all the people that are sitting around you at the time. Uh,
facts.
yeah, but exactly. You can find us anywhere. Again, anchor.fm/, aka sports, or even facebook.com/, aka sports FB. But let's go ahead and jump into this week's topic. Obviously, this one is a slightly time dependent a little bit simply because of what happened in the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs and the Bills, a game that went into overtime, and then of course the Bills didn't play defense. The Chiefs were able to score fairly quickly, and that was the end of the game, which of course I think the growing sentiment amongst NFL fans is that they're kind of tired with this NFL overtime rules. And before we really jump into what kind of rules that we could potentially change it to, Fletch, tell us exactly where the rules kind of started with the NFL, where they are currently, so we can have a much better idea of exactly where we can go from here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, um, overtime was not necessarily a thing to begin with. The NFL added the overtime period in 1970, or yes, 1974, to basically, help resolve these games. So since then, the rules have evolved a little bit. Essentially, what the old rule used to be was a sudden death game. The first person, the team that won the coin toss, essentially would receive the ball 99.9% of the time. And if that team was to score first, regardless if it was a field goal or touchdown, that team won. Those rules then changed circa 2010. When those rules changed, I believe it's no, I take that back. I take that back. 2017. It changed basically where we shortened the period. It used to be a whole additional quarter, 15 minutes, like the second, third, and fourth quarter. Then they reduced that to 10 minutes for player safety, which I'm totally fine with. Um, Especially with concussions, etc. And it's obviously football is a very demanding sport on the body. So, nonetheless, what the rules are currently is, and I'll actually just read this here. At the end of the regulation, there's a coin toss. Um, Essentially, one team will win the coin toss. No more, obviously, and then like we mentioned, no more than a 10-minute period. Um, the team that has the ball, if they score a touchdown first, that team will win flat out. That's kind of the sudden death part of the game still. However, if the team kicks a field goal, the other team does get a shot to have the ball, and then the other team can either match or score a touchdown to win the game. If you match, the other team obviously gets the ball back, and then we're now back to the sudden death play. If one team scores, first team scores a field goal, second team scores a touchdown, that team then wins the game. Is essentially how this works. That is the rule for the regular season. The rule for the postseason is essentially the same, except if the game is not decided within the first overtime, there will just be an additional overtime. Is really the only difference between the two. So what we're going to talk about here today is one. I think it's kind of the in the majority that most people disagree to an extent with the overtime rules. Some people are okay with the overtime rules due to the fact that that those people believe that not only, yes, you have the ball, you have a chance to score, but there is defense, and if you play defense and stop the other team, then your offense will get a chance to score. And I kind of and I do somewhat agree with that point to an extent. Now it's time for the nitty gritty, Clark. Let's go ahead and get into some scenarios of how we can essentially fix this overtime period. Because I think universally, while there's some that are okay with this because they understand, there is defense, and if you play it well and stop the team, you'll get the ball. But we know how these games go. So let's dive in a little bit here. Let's go ahead and go over some scenarios, and then we'll kind of see what we decide. And far as the end of the shows goes, we'll wrap this up. And I feel like I have it, Clark. I feel like I have the fix. But we're gonna go through some scenarios to see if these scenarios may be a better fit than what my fix is.
Hey, very, very possible. There are plenty of different options out there, especially with asking of different fans depending on what they want to see. Now, I think there were two key points that you brought up during the explanation there. First and foremost, player safety. We have to keep that in mind. We can't let this continue to linger on forever. Obviously, these are grown
Mhm.
men playing very hard 4 quarters to begin with. To ask them to play an additional, an entire quarter or just a lengthy process just for entertainment purposes, maybe not the best way to go about it. So let's keep that little nugget intact. Secondly, the other big important thing was really coming off of the AFC Championship game, is it seems like the sentiment around the fandom is they just want to see the other team possess the ball, give the other team a chance, even if their defense screws up. And that kind of leads us into our first option, which I found over on CBSSports.com. It's a pretty simple proposal. Both teams get the ball. So basically, the exact same rules, just as you stated. The first team gets the ball, regardless if they score a touchdown or a field goal, the other team will get the ball. Now, if that other team matches, then you'll go into sudden death from that point forward. It's a very simple fix. It's just simply giving the other team the opportunity to possess the football, similar to kind of what we see with the college football where they're guaranteed a possession. Obviously, you can still win with that if you happen to score a touchdown and do go for extra or 2 points, or the first team scores a field goal. You're guaranteed to get a possession regardless. So that's just the smallest of tweaks, which might actually fix things. But just for conversation's sake, and since you like hearing us talk, let's bring up a little bit more of a fancier proposal. Um, Actually, it was brought up by the Baltimore Ravens not that long ago, and this is the spot and choose rule, as they're titling it. And this is the way I read it is very interesting. So what the spot and choose rule is the team that wins the coin toss gets to choose any spot on the field to start their first drive of overtime. So if you pick the 10-yard line, you're 90 yards away from the end zone. The second team then gets to choose if they want to play offense or defense from that spot. It's still a 10-minute, but it would be a sudden death period. So first team scores wins. The only thing that would be different, obviously, is depending on where you want to actually start. For their example, Andy Reid would have picked, let's say he chose the 5 yard line. So the Bills would then have to choose at that point, do they want the ball at the 5 yard line to go all the way down the field, or would they want to play defense at that point? Which kind of solves the situation that the Bills were in, where their defense was just on the field for an extended period of time at the end of the fourth quarter. Maybe give them a chance to play offense, give their defense a chance to rest if it would have played out that way. Choosing the side of the field, it seems weird to me. Uh, Now, the thing that they didn't specifically state was if it was kind of like billiards. If you ever played pool before, when you have the cue ball, you have to start it behind the white line. But anywhere behind the white line is fine, but you have to start it behind that white line. So I don't know if that would come into play where you have to keep it at least behind the 50-yard line, behind the 35. That I don't 100% know. Fletch, I want to get your opinion on this. Let's say you are Andy Reid, you win the toss. Number one, which line are you going to choose? And then, based on that choice, would you want to play defense or offense first?
I got you. I got you. And is there a threshold? I guess you could say, like you said, like a white line in this rule at all, or is this
Not from what I've read. I don't see anything in there that states you would have to keep it there. So I guess technically you could put it at the 20-yard line heading in, similar to what we saw with old college rules, something along
yeah?
those lines. So based on that, yeah, you
Okay.
can choose wherever you want.
And to clarify for me and the folks at home, if I whatever spot I choose, not only am I playing offense from this line, I'm also playing defense from this line. Is that correct?
Well, that's an interesting part. So let's say their example is if the team that possesses the ball first scores a touchdown on the drive, they win. So very similar to the current rules. But if they kick a field goal, the game continues. This rule would take the coin toss out. You could choose play defense. The proposal it does not say if it's like college, the old college rule where you
Okay.
go to that exact same line. It does not state that.
Okay. Gotcha. And also, is it sudden death?
Uh, According to this, it says sudden death, uh,
Okay.
but yeah, it says sudden death. So I'm guessing if you get a field goal, you win. So I would assume you would have to have some kind of hindrance line there, because I know what you're thinking. I'll put it at the 10. I'm going to kick a
Yeah.
game-winning field goal. Be done with it.
I'm putting that the one, Clark. I'll be honest. We just gonna punch that ball in. We gonna run 3 plays, and if we don't, we kicking the field goal. We going home. Is personally what actually you know what I'm taking the ball at the one. I'm actually taking 2 plays. And I'm kicking the field goal on third down just in case somebody botches the snap. Is what I would personally do. I feel like that's almost too easy. Um, but that's what I would do to be real. If I won the coin toss and the ball's in my court, on my field, I should say, in this case. And I can put the ball anywhere 1 through 1 on the field, yard line 1 through 1. I mean, I just don't. I would want to get as close to the goal line as possible, man. I really would. Now, if there's a threshold, I'm just going to go with the closest point that I can. Is essentially what I would do as well, because I know if I score, what I'm saying, the game is over. So I'm going to pick somewhere where I know I'm going to be able to score from as easily as possible. Is what I would do in this situation, especially with it being sudden death. Also, too, not worrying about where the other team or playing defense from this place. Not worrying about if the team is going to get the ball, because if I score, they're not going to get the ball, and I'm going to win. So
Right.
that's where I'm at with it. I would punch it. I would put it at the one, man.
So yeah, the only thing it does say is that if they started out at the 1-yard line in your example, if you happen to go three and out, then you would have to. I don't know what you would do. It says the other team wouldn't have near field goal range after you punt. So I'm guessing based on this, they don't specifically state, but it sounds like there has to be some kind of threshold to where you can't go past this line. You can put it anywhere behind it, something
Yeah,
along those lines. Because like in your example and what we've kind of talked through is you put it at the 5-yard line, 1-yard line, whatever, it gonna be quick. Uh, it,
very.
it will not take long. So let's keep that in
Calling
mind.
my best play.
Yeah, we'll keep that in mind. The Ravens put this proposal out there. There are plenty of other ones that will go around it. The next one that we'll talk about also on CBS.com, the field goal gamble. This one is one of the couple of rules that we'll get into that is trying to eliminate the coin toss altogether. Again, not something that I don't think the fandom's really too worried about at this point, even though we've had, I think it's 8 straight Super Bowls, of which whoever won the coin toss lost the Super Bowl. I think that's
Mhm.
how that's happened. So if they wanted to get rid of the coin toss, basically what would happen is the home team would get to choose a place on the field. Let's say uh, some spot on the field and the distance for kicking a field goal. So in this example, they have it listed off. It's 59-yard field goal. And then the opposite team, the away team, would then be able to choose which team would actually have to attempt the field goal. The team that actually makes the field goal, if they make it, or if they attempt it and make it, they get the ball first. and then the overtime period is sudden death. They really like the sudden death of just first team scores regardless, wins the game. If they happen to miss, the other team gets the ball first, and we just start the old overtime rules of sudden death. Fletch, again, might be one of those that, I mean, you're probably going to pick a field goal range that you know your big leg kicker can make and theirs can't, uh, just to make sure that you get the
Facts.
ball. But that's assuming if the other team doesn't actually attempt it. So teams like the Ravens, teams like even Cincinnati's got big leg kickers. They're not really going to care where you put that football, especially if they're not the ones making the decision. Even if they mark it at 62-yard field goal, you're just going to say, all right, go ahead and attempt it. Like we're not going to put our big leg kicker out there. I,
Right.
I, it's very weird. This one's very weird. Fletch, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't like that one. It almost turns into like like you said, a kicking contest, and I just going to speak for the public out there. I don't think we want to see that.
No, especially when, again, one of the sentiments of the AFC Championship game is wanting the other team to actually possess the football. Not this way. Not just kicking field goals left and right. We can do that in the Pro Bowl if we really want to, which might spice some things up, sadly enough. Uh, but yeah, I not a big fan of that one either. Uh, let's move on to probably the simplest one. Is literally just keep the current rules. I mean, there's going to be a certain percentage of fans that are fine with it. Obviously, not everybody's going to be happy with it, but you could potentially keep the current rules. We'll keep that one in mind. There's not really too much to dive into that one. Uh, Another one, there's a lot of sudden deaths. They really love the sudden deaths here. These are from theringer.com for potential overtime changing rules. One is to literally go back to the old rules. First team scores wins. Uh, the other one is basically the same rules as of now, but or with sudden death. Um,
One thing I'm gonna mention, man, I really believe that we, to a degree, sudden death to me needs to go away. I understand it as far as a player safety concern because it does end the game sooner, more likely than not. The problem that I have with it, and that everybody has, it goes back to what we saw, like you mentioned, in the AFC Conference Championship game. If it's sudden death, one team gets the ball, the game is over if they score. Especially if you go back to the old rules where all you had to do was get in field goal range. What we
yep.
saw back in the day was as long as that team got in field goal range and knocked down that field goal, it was over. And a lot of teams, once they got in the field goal range, what we saw is them just basically lining up the field goal. They wanted to get into manageable range. Typically, anything under 45 and under is kind of the target I want to say for like a very manageable field goal that they feel like their kicker will be able to make no problem for the most part. And once they kind of cross that threshold, most teams essentially just kind of plan for the kick. So I really don't want to get back to the sudden death. I mean, the current version, I'll be honest with you, Clark, is an upgrade from the previous version. The previous version, it was literally you get the ball, you score a touch, or you score anything, the game is over. And then now you have to score a touchdown. So it's a little bit more pressure on the offense to actually score a touchdown versus just settling for a field goal. Because now if you settle for the field goal, the other team does get the ball. I think that's fine if you rely on your defense and you think your defense can stop the other team from scoring or matching you with the said field goal. But yeah, just going sudden death in general is in any form of it, I think is what needs to actually be excluded from the overtime rules to allow the fans to see what we really want to see. And that's a true winner of that game. I really came away from that Chiefs Bills game. Actually, I'm going to go even further. I came away with this whole NFL season, this playoff, really, with this in mind. All of the close games in the AFC playoffs, I have four teams that are looking at that essentially are fairly even with as close as these games were, and the fact that one of them was decided by an overtime in a sudden death situation. it just didn't sit well with me because I truly, not saying the Bengals didn't deserve to be there. I don't want to say that because they did. And they won the games, right? But there was something a little bit left to be desired with the way the playoffs ended, including the Super Bowl, just due to the fact that the AFC was just so tight. The Bengals had close games with the Raiders, the Titans, as well as the Chiefs. The Chiefs and the Bills had a hell of a game, and there's nothing that anyone can tell me that would persuade me otherwise in regard of those four teams. And when I say, and basically me saying that they're all four teams were on the same playing field. All four teams were just as good as each other. And again, that tells me those four teams would have been fine in the Super Bowl as well. I hate saying that because I feel like this is a little bit of slight to Cincinnati, and I don't want to go that far, but that's what I took away from it with the amount of close games. I know somebody has to win them, but unfortunately, overtime kind of sours that a little bit for us because we don't get to see the other team actually possess the ball. And essentially, in that game with the Bills and the Chiefs, which actually in the divisional round, I apologize. I mean, again, I came away from the game basically saying, well, whoever had the ball last is going to win this game, and they did win this game, plain and simple. We can go back to that game and dissect it, but and I don't want to go into any specific games, with that, but 13 seconds in regulation, no one would think the Chiefs would be able to score anything, but it happened. So, nonetheless, that's the reason I think why we're seeing a lot of scenarios there, Clark, with a sudden death is because of player safety. Um, which I have no problem with player safety and taking into consideration, but then I think we're sacrificing the competitiveness of the game.
Agreed. Yeah, I can understand that. We definitely don't want to go back to the old system just because we saw what happened and it didn't work out very well. It was always typically the first team, especially as potent as these offenses are now. Man, that coin toss is super important. You get that ball and that's pretty much it. That defense probably won't be able to stop them. So yeah, I agree. We definitely need something a little bit different than what we have. I've got my opinion, but before we jump into those things, we're not quite there yet. There was another idea from the Ringer, which we brought up off air, and we'll bring up now because honestly, I think we both had a pretty good laugh at it. But they wanted to bring in a slightly modified version of college football overtime. Not the current one, that is the 2 point conversion contest, but the other one where you basically start off. Their little twist was basically you could start anywhere on the field. If you want to start at the 50-yard line, start your own 25, having to go the entire field, something along those lines. But basically, both teams start from that spot, and then it's just back and forth until somebody doesn't get the job done. Uh,
Hmm.
I wasn't a big fan. I mean, I liked it in college football, but there were several games that got up to 6, 7, 8 overtimes, and that's asking so much for grown men that just played a full game to have to play potentially another entire half worth of football uh, just to get a winner. Obviously, it probably won't happen as often, but Fletch, what are your thoughts on potentially going back to the college football way?
Um, I actually like this a little bit more than anything else I've heard. The previous way that college football overtime went, to me, really helped decide the actual winner because at some point someone did get stopped. I agree with it being too lengthy, but at this and in not every situation, but a lot of different situations where we just saw multiple overtimes and neither team could stop each other. But I think that was also due to how close the ball was placed to the touchdown as well. I mean, what is it? Was it at the 20 or 25 yard line? I believe.
I think it was like
So
20 or 25. Yeah, that sounds right.
yeah, so it's just like, I mean, you're already very close. You know for a fact you're going to kick a field goal if you can't score the touchdown, unless you get sacked out of field goal range, which I've seen happen before. But it's just again, it leaves a lot to be desired, especially with the NFL. If we go completely to that, I do. like a variation of that, and we'll get into that later. But as far as that specific rule, I do actually prefer that over the current NFL overtime rules. I just don't think it should be an unlimited time frame. Is the only issue.
Agreed. Yeah, especially if we're going to keep an eye on player safety, we can't have them out there 24/7. Uh, we have to have some type of clock running to kind of help push things and move them along. I have a feeling I know what kind of different changes you would do, and I think that's very similar to this next one. So I'll hold off on that one. I think you're
Okay.
on that same direction there. Another crazier one that I saw was someone put in win by four is the name of this one. Uh, Basically, you have to be up by 4 points or more. First team to do that wins. Uh, well, I don't like that one all that
Sudden
much.
death.
Yeah, my goodness. It's like, okay, touchdown, that wins you the game. It's sudden death. The other team
Yep,
scores a field goal. The other team scores a touchdown. It's game over. Assuming they kick the extra point, which is sometimes questionable depending on the kicker.
that is true.
Yeah, it's basically the exact same rule we have now. Pretty much just the the, the
Small
diff
twist.
just a small twist of winning by four. So in case you miss the extra point, the overtime would continue versus just being ending. So you still have to do the obligatory extra point at the end of the game, which kind of reminds me of like college football days where people were celebrating. I think even in the NFL they did it where they scored a touchdown in the regular season. They were celebrating. Most of the team was already in the locker room, but we got to kick this extra point. Has to be done. So
Well,
I
with the
remember.
overtime rules, they don't actually. I think I don't believe they actually kicked the field goal. To be honest with you, once they scored a touchdown, I can't remember in that Bills Chiefs game did they
No,
actually
no,
kick
they
the
were
field goal
in the current one. No, they wouldn't have to. But according to this one, if
in
you have
this
to win by
situation?
four, touchdown
Hmm.
only counts for six. And if the other team scored a field goal, you got to kick the extra point.
True.
So it's a weird one. That one's just a. It doesn't really solve much. It doesn't solve the want of the other team possessing the football unless you don't kick the field goal or kick the extra point or the first team doesn't score. And then again, you're back to the same rules. It's just a really small twist to the current rules. Um, and then let's get into probably the weirdest one I have seen on this entire list. Even weirder than the last one. I, this one crazy. This one is called the auction off the field position. And just like in an auction, what they would do is instead of a coin toss to try and get rid of the coin, they would give the ball to the team who basically, after an auction happens, to figure out how close you want the ball, whoever wins the auction, that team possesses the ball first, and then uh, both teams have, I think, the chance to possess it, unless this one's also sudden death. Uh, no, it doesn't look like it's sudden death. So basically, we would have a small little auction before the game and overtime is actually played, which is going to take a little bit to do. There's probably going to be some coaches that are going to be very upset that they have to participate in an auction to figure out where to put this ball. But Fletch, I gotta ask
Yeah.
you. I gotta ask you.
Hmm.
Let's say if you're Andy Reid again, you win the auction. What line you going for?
I mean, it's very similar to that spot rule, man. I'm just gonna go as close as I possibly can. It's to the goal line. I mean, the key is the score, right? Like you got to score to win. I got to make it as easy as possible for my offense to score. We're just I mean, if we're gonna with an auction line, and I have a high powered offense, and I let's say if I have the Chiefs and I'm Andy Reid and it's overtime and I win the toss or I win the auction or whatever you want, however this is decided. I mean, I don't know how much pushback or if there's going to be a threshold with this rule or not, but essentially, if this is a line that both off, is this a line that both offense and defense have to play from?
I believe so. So yeah, I
Okay,
mean, I
it's kind
think
of
the
well
idea
understood.
is to try and pick a line that you're comfortable with as well as allows your defense to still work from.
I'd pick something near midfield. If I'm Andy Reid, I'm picking something out of field goal range first and foremost. So I'm looking at the 45-yard line and beyond. There's not many 60-yard field goals, so the 45-yard field goal will help eliminate any crazy deciding factors. I may even just go with the 50 flat out just to make sure I'm 100% safe from the Justin Tuckers of the world. Um, so yeah, I would probably, if I'm Andy Reid and the Chiefs, I'm probably going with the 50 because I know if we're both playing from the 50, I trust my offense more than any other offense in the league. I trust my quarterback more than any other quarterback in the league if I'm Andy Reid and the Chiefs. That's the mindset that they play with, and that's the mindset that they would have going into overtime, in my opinion. So I would probably stick with the 50, knowing I could score from 50 yards out. Will the other team be able to? Hell, they might, but I know I can score again from the 50-yard line. And how many times will the other team be able to? In that regard, I actually do like that rule. If there was a set boundary line that we would actually have to play from, this would eliminate kickoff returns as well with this rule in overtime. Which again, I'm fine. I'm totally fine with. That is one thing that was mentioned of having a high risk of injury back in the day. Back when you can wedge when you block on kickoff returns. Now they've eliminated the wedge, and we've eliminated some injuries, but there's still quite a few injuries that do still happen. Excuse me, still happen on the kickoff return. So helping eliminate that will help the player safety side of things. And also time frame. I mean, I just don't foresee teams literally being able to go back to back to back to back to back and score from the 50. Whereas in college, they only have to score from the 25, which made that way too easy, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I like the idea of pulling it back because a lot of offenses do better with a lot more yardage to work with.
True.
So they'll definitely appreciate that. It was interesting because on the article it lists the pros and cons for each one of these, and the con that this one was basically just imagine the referees trying to explain this to a national television audience.
Facts.
It's like, uh, and then how do they actually do the auction? Is this a silent auction? Do they make, the likes of Bill Belichick or Andy Reid walk out to the midfield with an envelope to hand the referees? Yeah, it would be if you want a laughing stock of a one, I think that's a pretty good one to pick there. Uh, but I think that's pretty much all the ones that are listed. Obviously, especially with the ones we just mentioned, there are so many different variables you can tweak depending on exactly what kind of parameters you really want to set, what kind of values or goals that you're looking for. Obviously, with all of us, we were talking mainly about player safety being at the forefront, as well as uh, kind of allowing both teams to at least possess the ball once or give them the opportunity to do so. And it kind of feels that way with the fandom. But I'll turn it over to you, Fletch. Fletch, you said at the beginning of this podcast that you've got it. You figured it out. You know
Yep.
exactly how to fix this problem. And I'm going to be interesting because I think I know what it is. You haven't told me. I really, I really don't know 100%, but I think based on just a few tidbits that you said throughout this podcast, I have an idea about what that is. But tell the people what the true fix is for the current NFL rules.
All right. All right. So I feel pretty confident about this. I've thought this over. This is something that's kind of amongst multiple things that we probably as sports junkies have debated with others and also kind of thought about on our own. Amongst, for instance, the one obviously being overtime rules, another one being how all-star games of different sports are played. We can go down the whole list of ideas, playoffs, college football playoff scenarios. There's so many things that I think we as viewers and that love these sports and love watching these games have ideas of. So I've thought this one through. To say the least, I've thought a lot of these things through that I've mentioned as well, but this one specifically I've kind of thought through. This is my rule, Clark.
Okay.
I say we set we set it up with a quarter again. Player safety is important, so no, we don't want a 15-minute quarter. Um, an NFL game is already 3 hours long. I don't want that much longer of a game. That's the first thing. Second thing, Clark, overtime should be exciting. when I watch an overtime basketball game, unless one team just lays it to the other team and the game is over, and that's the only time it's not exciting. Overtime is typically exciting in basketball. Baseball, we have extra innings, right? Also very exciting. There's a lot of pressure. You know, if you're up in the top of the 10th, if you don't put no runs on the board, another team does in the bottom, it's a wrap. Plain and simple. But it's not sudden death. Again, both teams have a chance to match each other. So as I get into this here, those are the things I want people to keep in mind. These are the things that have those two sports do a very good job of generating a little bit of excitement with the way their extra time frames are set up. With that being said, I would implement a 12-minute quarter up from the 10, but still less than the 15. First thing, keep the coin toss. Coin toss happens. I'm totally fine with that. Whoever wins the coin toss, you decide what you want to do. This is not sudden death. If you want to start with the ball, hell, start with the ball. There's no benefit of, say, kicking at the beginning of the game and getting the ball back at halftime in this point. So keep that in mind as a coach. That's the first thing. We keep the field goal toss. Secondly, both teams will get an opportunity to possess the football. One, if my offense goes down the field and scores a touchdown, the game will not be over. The other team will have a chance to match or do whatever they need to do on offense. This is my proposal. If the other team does not is unable to match, that team loses. That's the first thing. And I mean match anything, not just a field goal like it is now. If the other team is able to match the touchdown, say if you kick the extra point, go up 7, go for 2, go up 8, kick the field goal, up 3. I don't care what it is. The other team has a chance to match. If that other team matches, what we do is then we go to a somewhat of a college style football. And all of this is still timed, mind you. The clock will be running from 12 minutes on until the clock is at 0 or until this situation happens. So, first things first, I'm going to backpedal a little bit before I hop into the next segment, I guess if you will, of overtime. We're going to use the Chiefs and the Bills as our example as the most recent overtime game. Chiefs get the ball, they score. The Bills get the ball. Hypothetically, they score as well. The game is again tied after both teams scored a touchdown. The Chiefs come back, they get the ball, and there's no field goal. This is where the college rules come into play. We're going to place the ball, and again, this kind of goes back to that one rule that we talked about. We're placing the ball at the 50. We're not placing the ball at the 25. It's too close. We're not placing the ball on any one side of the field. I don't want anybody to have any kind of advantage. I don't want it to be too easy to score. I want to see football being played, and we put the ball at the 50. If that team scores, again, the other team can match. The clock is still running, mind you. This is the difference between what the college rules were and still are with no clock in overtime, and the difference between this rule is the fact that there is going to be a running clock. That means no matter what, we will have an end to this game. The only time now this is where things get a little dicey, and I've thought this through as well. So bear with me. So we have a 12-minute period. Both teams would do a traditional kickoff, first two possessions. Then we start the college football style overtime rules, placing the ball at the 50. Your offense has a chance to score. Say, for instance, we finish the whole 12-minute period and the game is still tied. Then at that point, we go into not so much a college style, but then we place the ball on the 20 and you get 4 plays. That's it. You get 4 plays. It's essentially a first and 20 situation or first and goal situation from the 20. By all means, do what you need to do to score what you need to score, and then the other team will have their last chance to do so as well. The game will not be decided until somebody doesn't score. Now, granted, we hate ties. I personally hate ties. I love to win. I hate to lose more than I like to win, and I think a tie is a loss. It's not a win, in my opinion. I think with these rules, you would see very, 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 very few ties. I do believe that we will see a lot more of somebody winning versus someone tying in that situation because of the fact that you're getting the ball at the 50 to start the game. And these, again, are NFL offenses. that should be able to score not easily, but at least from the 50, whereas instead of the 25. So that would be my rule proposal. Yes, it does bring back the tie to a degree, and I know that's what we were trying to eliminate. No one likes to see a tie. However, due to the fact that you just can't play with no clock, and prolong this game for longer than say 10, 12, or even 15 minutes. I don't want to go that far. Again, I would prefer a team I in this case I would prefer a team to tie than see players play for 20 plus minutes in an additional time frame and risk being injured because you're tired of playing in an 80 plus minute football game if it does go that far. So I think that at some point there has to be an end all be all of the overtime rules. So that would be my rules. First possession, for the team that elects to receive, and then the other team has a chance to match. If this team matches, then we place the ball at the 50, and we basically go offense for offense and see who can outdo the other team, and then the game will be over. With having a 12-minute period and not having to worry about going the entire length of the field, eliminating kickoffs for the rest of the game, I think that will help the player safety side of things, but also too, I think it will allow both teams to possess the ball more than once, probably in this situation, if they both score the first time, to allow them to actually decide the game and not the game be decided because I got the ball because I won a coin toss. Um, is what I would try to eliminate versus eliminating ties. That was my rule. I think that would be the fix. I do think that most people would agree that this was probably a good fix because what it allows is both sides of the ball to be used multiple times in order to determine a winner of the game. And no one can say, oh, at the end of the game, if they tie, you can't be that salty on both sides of the game if you both had a chance to get the ball. That's on those teams for not either scoring or not stopping the other team from scoring. The only issue would be the playoff, and I think the playoff you would have to have, say, after the 12-minute period is over, then yes, there has to be some kind of sudden death for the playoff. But for the regular season, I'd be personally fine with a tie, especially with us adding in a 17th game, possibly an 18th game that we talked about on previous podcasts that very well could happen in the next 5 to 10 years. A one tie is not going to destroy your season if you were to get in that situation with it being, more games played. So that's my fix. I don't know who may agree with me, who may not agree with me, but I do think that is a fair fix for not only the fans who watch and pay to watch these games, but also for the players to actually have both sides of the ball determine the football game.
Agreed. And I think the biggest point, like we mentioned quite a bit in this podcast, is just allowing that other team to possess the football. I think this is what the fandom has been craving, they've been wanting. I hear and seen a lot of different things, complaints since the AFC Championship game about why doesn't the other team get the football. There is a small little tweak that I would throw in there, and I think what I pulled up here was very similar to what you had, and I kind of nailed it on the head for the most part. Now, this tweak would be you completely remove the kickers. So it would be touchdown or bust the entire
Mm,
time. So you wouldn't ever try and kick a field goal because you don't have the option. You have to go for a touchdown. Um, in their example, it was after the first overtime, or in the first overtime, there is no conversion attempt necessary, I guess. And then the other ones is more like the old college rules. You have to go for two. I wouldn't throw those in there because, like you mentioned with player safety, eventually we're going to have to push it to sudden death at some point. Um,
hmm
just because we got to get a game finished here. They're going to have more games being played, and just like you said in the regular season, I'm all for if you tie. People don't like the tie, and obviously it's as a fan you don't want to go to a game and you see two teams end in a tie and you're like, well, we didn't lose, but we didn't win either. But those fans, the smarter ones, are going to look back and say, well, our team had plenty of opportunities to keep this from happening, and they didn't get it
exactly.
done. So I'm totally fine with that. But yes, the playoffs, there has to be at least some level of sudden death. I'm all for pushing it to towards the very back end if need be. But yeah, from based on what you said, I do like your idea. I would also throw in the touchdown or bust scenario, especially if as fans we're wanting to see the high-powered offenses. We don't want to see an offense,
Facts.
just get into field goal range. If the first one happens to not score, at a touchdown at all, then all of a sudden the other team just gets the ball to 50, and now it's just get in field goal range. That's all you have to do. Now you actually have to score a touchdown as well. So kind of interesting to see that. I was really going through these today before the podcast and reading through all of them, and a lot of them there's been bits and pieces that you can pull from that would help make this overtime make sense, but then there's a lot of them I read today. My goodness, I was like, why? Why are we even thinking about having two coaches auction off in the middle of the field to try and
It's
figure
too
out?
much.
Yeah, it's way too much. And again, just like the con said, imagine trying to be a referee trying to tell everyone this is how it's going to work, especially overseas in London where they constantly are trying to teach the potentially new generation of NFL fans, and we'll actually be getting to Germany within the next, I think, the next couple years. I think they're going to actually have games over in Germany, which, uh, interestingly enough, of the European
Yep.
nations, Germany was the most enthusiastic about American football. So it'll be very interesting to see if they can get a team in Germany, because I know at this point it's not really doable because of the whole COVID scenario. But we will eventually have a team overseas. It just may not be London where they want it to be. Of course, the size of the stadiums over there is just owners are licking their lips for the amount of ticket sales that could happen.
Oh, big
But
time.
yeah, for today's podcast, yeah, I really liked your example. Definitely could use a little bit of tweaks there. We could absolutely use the USFL, who just agreed to be basically, or was it the XFL? Was it the XFL that wanted to be the,
XFL.
yeah, wanted to be the petri dish, quote unquote, for the NFL? Didn't want to be the minor league NFL, but we had no problems, running different rule sets and different things to try and help the league out as well. Very interesting move on their part. Obviously, those who partner with the NFL will definitely last longer than those who do not. Um, and we may get into that down the road as well. But Fletch, I liked your example. I think we should implement it. Maybe we might be able to put it into a Madden game and test it out and see how well
I
it
wish.
works. Yeah, that would be pretty
Yeah.
cool. And we'll call it the Fletch rule. We'll give you your credit. Um,
Hey, like it. I like
just
it.
just hope it works, because if it doesn't work, then it's always the Fletch rule. Uh,
I'm
so
fine with that.
keep that in mind as well.
I feel like it'd be a really good fix though. Because I think that the things that we want to see are would encompass that. And I mean, and again, I'm speaking as a fan, but also speaking as somewhat of an athlete as well. Just knowing like I don't want to play that much longer of a game, regardless of how much I love football, regardless of how much I love any sport. Once everything runs its course, you can always have too much of something, and I think at some point you do have to call it a day. And I think that's where the tie is honestly going to come in place. And the reason for the 12-minute period is also to allow, I mean, let's keep it real. Like if you have the ball, we've seen multiple teams have a time of possession or one possession, long, lengthy drive. And I use like the Titans or the Niners as two running football teams that very well may run a lot. And they just constantly convert third and shorts. And now we're looking at a 7-minute drive that will at least allow the other team to get the ball and have some time left to score. And if they run out of time, they run out of time, just like in a real game. Like for instance, we saw with Dallas in the playoffs, they just ran out of time. You got to win the game within the time frame that is played. And if you can't win the game in the time frame that is played, maybe you didn't deserve to win the game, and that's where the tie comes into place. As much as I hate the tie, I think teams would. I mean, obviously for the standing sake and your playoffs, winning the tie is better than a loss. It's a half a loss versus a full loss. If I'm, 10-6-1 and my division rival is 10-7, then that tie actually helped me out. So plain and simple, that's kind of where I wanted to go with that rule. I do think there are some other options that I think the other options, excuse me, that will work. That would work a little bit better than our current option. I actually love the fact that they did adjust it to avoid the tie as much as possible, because I feel like we've seen less ties since the new rules have been implemented than we did when the rule was in place. So that's one thing that I at least want to mention as well. The changes that we've seen recently have helped, and I think this is simply just really a small tweak in those rules. Um, as far as on the front end, on the back end with the college style starting off the 50. The reason why I went with that, man, is let's be honest, like how many exciting college football games that we have seen going to overtime. And I'm not talking about the super lengthy ones because after a while they just get really dull. I mean, those three, four, five overtime thrillers, where it did take a few additional possessions to make it happen. It's just the placement of the ball was just far too close for my for my liking because you're essentially giving them the field goal as something to fall back on, and versus them being out of field goal range. I think you need to be able to. I think you should be able to, or should have to, I should say, work your way into field goal range from the 50, which not that hard to do, but it is you still have to at least convert one first down in order to do so. Because nobody's kicking 5, because that's essentially, again, like we talked about a 57 to actually kick the field goal, go up 3, or match the other team at 3, or whatever the case might be. Um, One thing I will mention with that overtime rule, and this is something I've thought about as well with overtime in general, is eliminate punts. Um, I mean, it's overtime. I mean, I grant field possession is part of the game, but it's overtime, and we want to see some excitement. Also, I think that will help decrease the chance of a tie is if you did go with a rule as such where you on fourth down you can't punt. It's either field goal or you're going for it flat out. If it's 4th and 1 or 4th and 20, it doesn't matter. You can't punt the ball. um, I think that might be something as well that would bring a little bit of excitement to the game, knowing that your team has to go for it on fourth down. How demoralizing is it as well if you have somebody on 4th and 10 and they convert and then end up winning the game? Like that's very demoralizing for the opponent, and that very well could actually win the game for you and not even be a sudden death situation just because you've demoralized the other team. By the time the offense takes the field, who knows what the mind state might be at that point in time, depending on the mental toughness of that team and etc. and all that good stuff. But that I think even doing something along those lines is cool. And I do like your touchdown or bust as well, where even on fourth, you can't even kick a field goal. You do have to actually score a touchdown. In that case, in that situation, I'll probably get rid of the punts. I don't know. As I would still keep, I would still, I'm sorry, I would still keep the punts out, get rid of them still as well. And at fourth down, again, there in that case there would be no field goal as well as no punting, and you have no choice but to go for it. And again, that leaves excitement for us, the fans, and that's something that we might want to see, or I think that's something that we would like to
Yeah, there's definitely some tweaks that can be made. I think again, the simplest could
just
just simply be
the teams kick the field goal, they're out of field goal range, are they going to convert the game?
yeah. We can definitely potentially tweak some things along the way. The simplest could very well be just simply giving the other team the opportunity just to possess the football. But who knows? I mean, with this XFL thing, we could see a lot of variations coming along that the NFL may be interested in to help obviously promote more scoring, which makes more fans want to stay around for a little bit longer of those games. But definitely, I would stay away from the college football current rule, the 2 point conversion contest. That one's a pretty easy stay away from. But for everything else, it's within range for the most part. But like we stated earlier, I think with the other team just getting the ball at least one other time, just give them the opportunity, I think that would at least appease the current quota until something else comes along. Fletch, anything else before we shut up shop today?
No, man. I enjoyed the show. I think this is something that a lot of people have probably given some thought to, especially with the current, situation and the situations, I should say, that we've seen over the last few years. One being ties, two being like, you score a touchdown, the other team doesn't even get to field the ball. So, in general, man, I think that's something to kind of give people at home something to think about, as well as what would be your best case scenario? What do you think? What at least, if not fixing, tweaking, to kind of give us what we want to see.
Agreed. And if you do have your own comments, just simply put them in the little comment section. You can either go to facebook.com/AKA Sports FB or simply follow us on Twitter. You can go to anchor.fm/AKA Sports as well and follow along. Uh, Great topic here today. We'll be grabbing yet another one next week. As for now, my name is Clark Heron, aka the Hairy Hobo. That's Fletch, and we're out of here.
Peace.